It is Thursday, January 22nd, 2026. We're in the Nauset Meeting Room at Town Hall, and it is exactly 10 a.m. On our agenda is the login information if you wish to join us virtually through Zoom. There's also a telephone number and a webinar ID if you'd like to join by telephone. I'll call us to order and welcome all the members around the table: Bob Mullen, Lynn Bruneau, John Smith, myself, your chair, Kevin Galligan, Judith Bruce, Ginny Farber, Mary Wright, our recording secretary, Karen Sharpless. In the room today is our consultant from down east Maine, Mike Giggy. Welcome, Mike. So good to see you in person. Yeah, we won't be worrying about Zoom slides and Zooming. George Meserve and everyone else in the room, welcome. So anyone here for public comment?
And Tim's
Oh, Tim. Welcome, Tim, from AECom. See you on Zoom.
Thanks for having me.
Charlie Carlson, come on up.
If I can just ask that I reserve my public comment for later on
Sure.
when we're dealing with the questions
Absolutely.
and all of that sort of thing.
Yep. All right. Anyone on Zoom for public comment? Not seeing any. We'll move on to Mill Pond evaluation. And great progress, everyone. We have teed up a presentation for 5 o'clock today. Just a quick check. Can everyone make the meeting? Nods? So just so you know, and I chatted very, very briefly with George just the other day, as we've done in our past community meetings, if it's okay with the committee, I'll just introduce everyone, kind of give a little background in terms of how we all have been designated and, advise the select board on things. But I plan to actually, if it's okay with you, because it's out there, and George will be going through the presentation, but, right in the postcard that was mailed, we've kind of given away the last slide, which says, we've already kind of indicated, voted the direction we plan to recommend to the select board in terms of the three options. So I'll mention that early and say folks are more than welcome to comment on any and all. And let George take it away. Mike will be here in person. Thank you, Mike, for that. And then I'll field Q&A like we've done in the past. If there are some that are in more specific topic areas, I'm looking at Bob, wastewater management, and those that might be conservation related. Jenny, I'll go to you. Some may be planning, water and sewer, Conscom, Judith, but some may be planning and zoning. So Mary, you'll get those.
okay.
And of course, John, you always get the bulk of questions. Board of Health. So we'll see how that goes.
Which we all appreciate.
We do. And Lynn is, I consider, our historian from all things. So Lynn will actually remind people, no, in fact, actually, it didn't occur that way. So
I'll bring my warrant article.
bring your warrant booklet.
Right.
So I think we've got it down pretty well. I suspect, George, 20 minutes of your
I think
presentation.
it's about 20 minutes to run through, at a reasonable cadence. Just a couple minor things. Tim will also be on Zoom, so we have our full team here for all questions on the various aspects of the study. And I did make a quick handout for the meeting. I wanted to keep it to one page, so I gave just, as you recall, there was a table of the red light, green light for the various options, and a map to go with that. So we'll have that available, 50 copies for that.
Nice.
Don't have any idea if we'll have 10 people or 60 people in the room, but that's our max, so.
Postcard went out. I know actually Mark Matheson from Marine Fresh Water Quality indicated it was discussed at their committee, so there'll be some interest from those folks. So,
Somebody came to the town hall yesterday expecting the meeting.
good.
So they had the date wrong, but they're
Well,
planning on coming
I'm
back.
back again.
OPC posted it on social.
Oh, nice.
Water and sewer announced it yesterday.
Yeah. So, George, I mean, I never take bets on, are we going to fill the room or we'll be talking to one person? But it's all good in terms of getting the word out. Because, again, the purpose is to have us hear that feedback that then informs our final recommendation to the select board.
And a lot of people I've spoken to have appreciated the fact that it will be available by Zoom.
Good.
So that's always a great option for
Exactly.
people who can't be here in person.
So, Mike, any words of wisdom in terms of thoughts that we should anticipate or You've seen the presentation.
I think we're ready.
Tim, you're in good shape for tonight, technology-wise, and,
Yes, I am.
all right, great. So fertilizer reduction alternative, Mike, you've put together a little memo, and I think this will be an important item. I suspect it'll come up quite a bit tonight in terms of, you know, all the various aspects in terms of effectiveness, enforcement, you know, those sort of things.
Okay. I have a bundle of slides here covering really 3 topics.
Good.
And the first 2 are under this agenda item of Mill Pond related. So let's jump right in. Recall our January 8th meeting. We talked about fertilizer issues. And I think I said at that time, we're just starting looking in more detail at that one of the 3 options that we're going to consider over the next couple of months. I figured it was a time to kind of keep some momentum on that subject, so I presented some information 2 weeks ago, and I have some more here. And as I said last time, I was had hoped to talk to Michael Herman in advance of last time. He was away, he's back. He and George and I had a good, productive conversation with Tim. So I've got some updates to what I said 2 weeks ago. So let's first focus on Chapter 103 of your existing bylaw. And I got some dates clear in my head now. It was adopted in 2013, amended the next year, but the background to that is that word had come down that after a certain date, the jurisdiction over municipal fertilizer regulations was going to flip to the state. So the town did the right thing to get this in place, so that's on the books now. And the performance standards are not bad. The seasonality, no winter application, no application on impervious surfaces, avoidance of fertilization just during or after heavy rain, a limitation or actually a ban on nitrogen and phosphorus application within 100 feet of a resource area, and the requirement to test the soil before phosphorus applications. Noticeably, there's very little about enforcement in this existing bylaw, and that's a gap that perhaps we need to fill. But as I look back over these performance standards, notice the title is nitrogen and phosphorus control, and you have to be careful when you use the word ban because that is a state function. But guess what? Let me play devil's advocate. You have a ban in place for half the year, and you have a ban in place within 100 feet of resource areas. So maybe we shouldn't politically call this a ban, but those are important aspects. So that's been in place for over 10 years. Now there are 2 home rule petitions sitting in Boston as we speak, and Michael Herman has been leading that charge. The first item would be a town-wide ban on the use of fertilizers except for commercial agriculture and except for homeowner use in fruit trees and in vegetables. Now, the supporting information was adopted by the town at a town meeting in 2022. It now sits as a House Bill number 994. And interesting the way the legislature works. There was a previous version of this bill, but the 2-year session of the legislature ended, so now it had to be refiled. It was refiled in January of 2025. And if it's not acted upon by the end of 2026, it's going to be refiled again. So there's some cumbersome logistics about its application. At the same time, there is a home rule petition related to control of pesticides. Similar situation in terms of town meeting action, House bills being filed and then refiled. Broad conclusion I've drawn from looking at the relatively brief language for each of those bills is that neither one of them it addresses enforcement at all. And the question that quickly jumps into my mind is that if the legislature decides that the town of Orleans cannot have the authority to control or ban fertilizer use, does that mean that the existing bylaw is superseded or not?
No. Because you just said it just before when you said control versus ban. We're controlling what's happening as a
Yeah.
management plan. We're not banning anything outright.
But you heard my comment earlier, John,
But
that,
you-
ban-
it's all about words.
there you go. So I think that's important. I'd like to hear from the town council as to whether or not a negative report or negative action in Boston would do anything to change this existing bylaw. So let's look ahead. I put together 3 scenarios here to get you thinking. First scenario, in tomorrow's mail, the select board gets a note that those 2 House bills passed. Boom. Won't we be happy? The town could then, I think, go ahead and add some enforcement provisions now that in this scenario where they've been granted the ability to control that. So there's one scenario. Number 2, let's say that nothing happens this year. It gets pushed off till next year. So we've added a year and a half to the schedule. Scenario 3, you open the mail next week and find out that those bills have been rejected. So, which is worse, finding out it's not approved or not finding out, or no action being taken? And I think we have to think in those terms. We probably could all pick the odds that one or both of those home rule petitions would be approved by the legislature. I heard some enthusiastic optimism from Michael Herman, but he also said that in the big picture of all the home rule petitions governing anything in all the towns in the cities and towns in the state, fewer than 10% are enacted.
Question, and maybe, Kevin, do you know, what I don't know about and what I don't remember is whether in some of the somewhat recent select board meetings, whether Michael Herman has talked about, have these 2 Orleans petitions been bundled with any similar coming from other towns across the Commonwealth looking for something similar? I'd be curious to know whether they're being, because what we're looking for is local control and broadening the definition of the scope and scale of local control. So I wonder whether the legislature is bundling things of common topic. Just curious.
Really, the timing of bringing this up, and Lynn, your question is great, because starting this afternoon through Saturday, the annual Mass Municipal Association meeting is occurring. Michael's there, I'll be there, Mark Matheson will be there. We'll be interacting with Senator Sear, Representative Luddy. We're meeting with the Lieutenant Governor tomorrow.
Excellent.
So I'll bring these up in terms of just that question. But I think the other thing, I'm looking at Ginny because she knows, Michael's also been monitoring all the other towns that are attempting the thing. So I don't think, we're a one-off anymore. I think there is a small core of other communities that will actually give some motivation to the legislature broadly to look at this. Because, again, when Julian and Hadley go up, a lot of the body up there says, oh, this is a Cape thing. So we're much better off when we're not just a Cape thing legislatively. So I know they're working to try to broaden the support.
That was, I was wondering about, yeah, especially, thank you.
Okay.
One other thing, if I might, just talking, nothing ever happens in isolation, right? And when we're doing home rule petitions, a lot of it is about education too, and promoting the behaviors we would like to see in a community. And if no fertilizer is part of that, then just like cigarettes, for decades, they were everywhere. And then because of the broad outreach and the broad education about what harm they brought to a person, it helped transition that to what we have now, which is an outright ban for younger people, but still a controlled way of disseminating their use across the adult population. And same thing could happen here, too. So I'm just saying, an education outreach program might be part of that, too.
Let's call it the groundswell.
The groundswell.
Phenomenon.
That's the groundswell.
And that's really what I'm getting at in the last 2 points on this slide. We need to think about the possibility, maybe some would say likelihood, that a home rule petition is not going to pass, or the kick the can down the road phenomenon where
Yeah.
we hope but we don't know. So the opposite end of the groundswell approach, John, is let's go right now. Let's take the bylaw we have and let's amend it. And of course, these aren't issues that you would look for opinions from your consulting engineers on. There's a whole lot more than that here, but I think that's a key decision that this group ought to think about. One would say the possibility of a negative answer, or more likely, I think, the possibility of no answer. So there you go. So as I always try to do, and I think Tim does too, let's lay out some broad alternatives. I presented these last time to kind of think about the range of what you might do. And there's a lot to be said for better public education. Now, I'll let you folks decide whether public education alone would make a dent in the amount of lawn fertilizer that's used in any of our coastal embayments. But that's one way to go. Another way is to take your existing bylaw and institute some financial penalties. And with that comes the baggage of probably additional town staff, all the turmoil associated with hearings to impose fines and all those things. But still, if you think that the education tactic is not going to be as successful as you hope it would be, then I think you have to go to this second alternative. And the third alternative, the townwide ban, I think, quote-unquote ban, is probably only on the table if we get positive action from the legislature. So I'm looking for feedback from this group and others as to kind of direction here. We don't need to make any decisions today, but if you did ask me to say, hey, how might we improve that existing bylaw? I would first say, well, let's extend that no fertilizer zone, my words, to include the watersheds of all coastal embayments that have a nitrogen-based TMDL. Let's just not go to the 100 feet from the resource area. Let's put it on all nitrogen-sensitive embayments. I think that's a no-brainer. The no fertilizer zone could also be explicitly extended to 300 feet or more around freshwater ponds. So you're taking a provision that sets an area and imposes a restriction on it. I'm saying let's broaden those areas in both cases, nitrogen and phosphorus.
Include vernal pools. Include vernal pools.
Thank you. Yep. Is that not a resource area?
It is.
It is, but they disappear, so
They disappear.
Yeah.
the
They're
language,
not easily seen.
they're not easily seen.
And of course, maybe we'll be having a detailed talk in a few time on this, but I wanted to kind of lay out
Yeah.
what my current thinking
Sorry
is.
to interrupt.
And certainly, there needs to be some teeth, and teeth can be teeth in a grimace, a fine, or teeth in a smile, incentive. So I think we need to be thinking about both aspects of that. And another thing I noted is that I think there's lots of good reasons to encourage people to use compost effectively, and it really gets to lawn health. The healthier the lawn, the less fertilizer that might be used will leach. So there's some of my ideas, and I hope you can all add to them in future meetings. But I think it's time to ask the question of town council, can we do this? Maybe, and can we do it if there's no action at the legislature? And can we do it even if there's a negative action at the legislature? So I'm not sure, town council, I'm not going to go anywhere near those questions, but you can see, I think, why they're important.
But we have had success in amending bylaws. A recent case is the Betterment Assessment Bylaw, where that has been amended through a couple cycles. So we know that there are ways to amend bylaws with success, so that can be done, certainly.
I would just add too, Mike, and for the advisory committee, I mean, if we approach this in the recommendations we're going to make to the select board, I think they would benefit by some specific, next steps, including visit with town council on steps to beef up our bylaw, make it actually more supportive of our comprehensive wastewater management plan. Always use that plan as kind of the springboard to the reason we introduce these. That also helps us, because the bylaw has got to be revised at town meeting, the pushback we might get to say, folks, we are not trying to harm everyone, we're actually trying to help everyone. So you use that as a basis for going forward. But I do think, Mike and George, you will notice, we'll be continuing with the weekly meetings with town council. We did appoint new town council last night. They have an incredible team available to us because of this new arrangement. And, you might schedule an office visit with Karis North.
Yeah, we'll try to get ahead of this one.
Exactly, because I think it'll give her and her team time to mull these over and give us good advice on that. But great suggestions, Mike.
I think it would be helpful, especially to know what other people are doing with regard to things like incentives and the concept of violations. So none of it would be, I can't imagine what the incentives might be, but understanding the concept of the fines, if you will, the punishments, and the structure for that, because that just becomes costly to try to do an infrastructure for that. But thank you, Mike.
And I did reach out to the Cape Cod Commission to ask that very question. What are they seeing other towns doing with respect to fertilizer? I haven't had a response yet, but good to do
Kevin,
that.
the other thing is that this falls into this whole program that Amanda's doing on Community That Cares. And the Board of Water and Sewer is going to be putting out lots of information around water use, so drought issues. So all of these things you're talking about in terms of, do we penalize people? Do we incentivize them? All this different, that's all the same conversation we're having around water use. And I think the promotion materials that we'll be trying to develop around water use, to this Community That Cares grant, we're going to do this conversation whether it's related to the home rule petition or not. Because I think the town, and to your point about, where do we put these restrictions? Well, Lord knows, I would rather just tell everybody in town, just give it up. I mean, just stop. Because rather than saying, well, if you're at 692 Main Street, you have to do it, but if you're at 469, it really doesn't apply to you. Oh my God! I mean, we've now confused everyone, and they're going to say, oh, that told me to put more fertilizer on. That's what they're telling me to do. So, I think we have to be thinking about how we are consistent in messaging, whether we are in the no fertilizer zone or not. It's the conversation around what fertilizer does and doesn't do, and how do we make that message clearer, at least initially, and then we can get into, quote, the weeds on, no, you really can't. So I think there's a lot of, and then there's the whole problem, and I digress just for a second. I was listening to today where, Isaiah, or God told Isaiah, you can tell them all you want, but they probably won't listen. So it's how do we create that message that will get people to be thinking about it far more proactively. So we're not the first people, I guess is my point, that have had this problem.
I was just going to say that in terms of, it's a lot easier to get people to change if they have something to replace it with, motivation and incentive and.
Money.
And we have a composting program here in Orleans. And one of the other things that struck me was that you actually created a composting tea, right? That you use on the soccer fields and the ball fields. And the tea is a lot like what we spread if we have a fertilizer truck. And if you can tell people how to make, if there's a formula or if there's a way to actually create that and have it as a substitute for what people use currently on their lawns, that's a program that might be, if there's a tank they can go and fill with, who knows? But something that gives them something to replace, this for that, just as a possible.
And if there's one topic that I think has been at the forefront of many minds in Orleans, it's the cost of meeting those nitrogen-based TMDLs. So bless your hearts for looking for ways to wherever you can, including fertilizer use, to reduce that overall cost. And that's the argument I would make if you asked me to go to Boston and testify on this bill. It's the state conceivably tying your hands in terms of all that you need to do to meet the state requirement that you remove nitrogen. So,
Yeah, with friends like these, right? With friends like these, who needs enemies, right? Yeah, right.
okay. So this is a continuing topic. We've had a bit of a respite here in terms of the public meeting today, and so I decided to try to get the ball rolling on fertilizer. We don't have any conclusions yet, but I appreciate the feedback. So can we move on to the next agenda item? So we're, Tim and I and George have been working to address a set of 5 comments that Mr. Carlson made in an email to Kevin Galligan. And based on Kevin's request, we addressed those. We prepared a document that was finalized yesterday that everybody should have. And not my goal today to go into any detail on those 5, but let me just say, what a benefit this group has had from a concerned citizen asking a lot of good questions. And I think the 5 that were responded to are all in that category. So I'll just very briefly, there are the 5. And the first one was, could the town ask DEP to accelerate the TMDL process for Mill Pond, which really means for the whole Nauset system? And the simple answer is yes. And based on various sources, I think in total it would be a $500,000 or more project, probably would take 4 years. Now, there's some funding sources that might reduce that, but yes, the town could. I'm going to let somebody else answer the question, should the town? Separate. The answer was could, and the question was could, and I think the answer to the could part is yes.
So, so in thinking about this, it also occurred to me, or I had a concern, I guess, a pretty strong concern. Should the town go forward and say, we would like to establish a TMDL, and therefore then get Mill Pond designated nitrogen sensitive, we know that then starts the clock. If in looking at that, the town is unable to fund both improvements at Mill Pond and Pleasant Bay with the current obligation at Pleasant Bay, does that then kick everyone in the Mill Pond watershed into having to install IA systems because they can't do, I'm not saying this clearly, but okay, you follow.
Right.
Do we, I mean, we've worked very hard to avoid that situation where Orleans has to, within nitrogen-sensitive watersheds, have all of the people within those watersheds install innovative alternative septic systems. And the reason for that is because we have a watershed permit. And we've been working, I mean, that's why we had some conversations with Eastham already on, will you establish a watershed permit with us in Nauset estuaries? If we push that ahead, but then can't fund it, are we going to end up putting those folks in the position where they have to pay for innovative alternative systems?
And I think, Mike, as you identified in the response, it really is important to recognize this is a system. This is not just, a bathtub called Mill Pond. The waters all interact with each other. So in fact, being the system that it is, we have got to do this in concert with Eastham. So we have got to have a willing partner. I think there'll be a time when it does come, but I think it's a matter of, do we force the issue, or do we let, their evolution of their first phase give them some confidence and motivation, because that's what we've learned. We committed to, built first phase, connections going on, phase 2 went smoothly. Amazingly, we're already up to, bidding soon for phase 3 and planning phase 4. So we as a town have incredible supportive momentum. It's incredible change from 20 years ago. Eastham is just beginning that. So my concern is not having something like this upset that cadence that's going on, because it really is positive. I think this could really, if we try to force this on our voters, we could shut down our whole program. I really have that concern.
Well, in that regard, though, because it takes quite a few years to get this all the way through, it could become part of the planning process so that we know when we're going to advocate on behalf of this.
That's the threading that needle where Judith
Right,
is going.
right.
And to answer John's question to Judith as well, here's the sequence. If a TMDL were to be issued, then the towns involved would file a notice of intent to undertake watershed planning and get a permit. So that filing of that notice of intent is what would stop the IA trigger.
Okay.
However, the notice of intent might say, we in Orleans intend to look at this and we'll get to it in 2065. Then the question is that a suitable request of DEP to give you that long? So bottom line is we've got to be really cautious about that route, and your thought is well taken.
But it doesn't change the discussion we're having now, because the study that was funded in town meeting was for near-term, small bites to work towards cleaner water, just as we did for Crystal Lake and Pilgrim Lake with alum and Lonnie's Pond with oysters. So the TMDL is almost a red herring that muddies the conversation, because we're looking at near-term activities.
And to that point,
Bob, you can go.
Yeah, I was just thinking, that there's some, it'd be good to look at the timeline of issues that we have to address, like the treatment system with phase 4 will be at what, 95%? What's the timeline for expanding that? And also, jumping ahead to the groundwater discharge permit, what's the time frame to do that? And is there a way to plan ahead to say, all right, this looks like maybe it's a good time to push for the TMDL?
Judith, you're going to add? You good? Okay.
So the second question that we've addressed is, the question was, what's the cost should the town decide to do a limited sewer system just to make up the gap between what might be accomplished in the three things on the table now, PRB, fertilizer, aquaculture? What's the cost to sewer, to remove the rest? And fair question. The expectations now for the three alternatives, should they all be implemented, and you haven't made that decision, you've made the decision to look at all three, but should they all be implemented, they might remove about 400 kilograms per year of the target of 750. So that would leave about 350 less that could be accomplished by sewers. That's about 60 homes. The question was, what's the cost? And this group has asked Tim and I to evaluate that cost in the upcoming work. So there's no specific answer that says, here's the cost, but there is a commitment to develop that cost as part of the next phase of the work. The third question, question C in this list, if the three alternatives are all implemented, will we see lower nitrogen concentrations in Mill Pond? And the simple answer is certainly yes. And that gets directly into the next question, and is there a tipping point for Mill Pond where less than complete nitrogen removal still results in meaningful improvement in water quality? And that's a great question. And I think the answer is yes, there probably is a tipping point. Is it feasible to try to determine what it is? I would say, I don't think so. And here's why I say that. We've talked a lot, and we probably need to talk more about what is good water quality. The ability to swim, the ability to kayak without seeing floating algae. There's bottom organisms to be dealt with. Each one of those different habitat impacts that occur now, we're going to try to relieve those impacts. And the time for that relief to be felt in terms of observable benefits is different for each one of the impacts. So you've got 5 or more problems you're trying to solve or indicators you're trying to reduce, and they're each is gonna have a different curve. So how do you combine all 5 of those? I think it's not the case that, go back a second, 750 kilograms per year is sort of the target we've talked about, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say that's a hypothetical number. It's not based on anything other than a place to start. So I think the question could be phrased, do we have to get to 750 before we see any results?
Oh.
And I think, no, that's not true. And the related question might be, is there have to be like a linear progression of improvement as we go towards the 750? And I think no. I think it's going to depend on which impact we're trying to relieve. And on that, I'd ask you to think about Lonnie's Pond. We have an ongoing shellfish harvesting operation that removes about 20% of the TMDL. And George most recently has told me about the improvements in water clarity. Well, so are we done? No, we're not done. But if you pick that one parameter, maybe we're further along than we are in the others. But so to try to amalgamate all of the different impairments, it would be, yes, it would be possible. But I think if you had 3 skilled marine scientists and you asked that question, you'd get 4 answers. So good thought and an educational process to think through it.
And we've seen this as well with alum treatments. They're short-term remediation of an area, for the freshwater ponds. They've worked, but it didn't completely eliminate all of our algae bloom, the blooms. It reduced them significantly, and it gave us clear water in all of in those freshwater ponds. But it didn't solve all of our problems. But it's a good step forward for all of that.
And similarly, what we saw with OPC's oxygenation project at Sarah's Pond, yes, immediately it suppressed the release of phosphorus. So, okay, then you look at that and say, well, great, then the pond is fixed because there's no more phosphorus being released into the pond. But no, that wasn't the case. So we rolled along for a couple of years seeing a little better and then a little worse and then maybe a little better. And then boom, in the 4th year, we saw a huge sustained improvement where Dr. Wagner now feels that there has actually been improvement to the substrate of the pond and actual starting to progress towards ongoing health of the pond. Well, who knew that? I mean, you could have asked 10 limnologists 5 years ago. None of them could have given you a definite. There were lots of opinions as to what would happen. Nobody could say for sure what would happen. And this is just one pond, and every system is different. So I think some of these questions that are asked, there just aren't, we might want answers, but there aren't answers. Yeah. And I think one of the things that's somewhat troubling or confusing with this study, to our townspeople is that the way we approach things is generally to do a complete assessment of the water body. From that, to put together a plan for how we're going to approach it, and then to implement that plan. So whether we're looking at the Mass Estuaries project for estuaries, or we're looking at the individual management plans for the different freshwater ponds in town, that's what we've done. This is the first time that we've looked at something and said, well, are there interim measures that are low-tech, low-cost, that can be implemented to start making some progress while we wait to do a complete assessment? Because the other piece of this is, we know we need the complete assessment, but what was that going to be, $500,000 in 4 years? These are expensive, and so they have to be timed when we can actually implement it, because otherwise you spend $500,000 now, and then you turn around and you spend the same $500,000 again because you need updated information to be able to implement the plan. So, yeah,
The
I'll shut up.
experience that we should all think about with respect to the Pleasant Bay watershed permit. The new permit, the modified permit, is about to be issued, good news. The 5-year update in the 7th year. But there's a monitoring section in the current permit and the new one. And there's also strong words about adaptive management. So let me use the 750 kilogram per year hypothetical target here. We should be, and you must, under the permit, in any of the sub-embayments in the Pleasant Bay system, you have to look at the water quality every year. And at some point, you have to say, well, just a minute now. We should increase the goal, or we should decrease the goal, adaptive management. So, and that really gets to the point is, this is not black versus white. There's a ton of gray, and we can't expect things to be a simple formula. We have to keep an eye on them, adjust occasionally.
And towards that end, again, I look at that and I think is it not phases 9 and 10 that are poachy? And we've already said that looking at poachy in the Pleasant Bay system, it is possible that we're going to have to do significantly less sewering of that area because of the additional attenuation that we're now seeing from the marsh areas. So wouldn't that be good news? I mean, all of a sudden, Mill Pond may not be phase 11. It may end up becoming phase 9 because we don't have to do 9 and 10. Did I lose?
An opportunity to move stuff around.
Right.
Can I circle back to the Lonnie's Pond example for a moment? And I think it's worth talking about for a bit, because when the oysters started and started to make things better in the marsh, in the pond, the marsh improved. The neighbors were thrilled. They became very aware of what the impacts of the actions on their property was to the pond. They started using less fertilizer, embracing what they could see. They could see their marsh thriving, which helped improve the quality of the pond, which helped improve the marsh more, which helped. And so it's not like this is one thing. I think about it as an infection on your skin. You do one thing, it helps, it boosts your immune system, and it's all symbiotic? Is that the right word?
To John's point.
Yeah, it just spirals. So it's not one little thing. It's the steps that come after.
Good feedback loops.
Really good point, Jenny.
The fifth question was, I think, focused on the fact that the water quality that is undesirable is worse at depth. And the question was, would elimination of the excess nitrogen load result in water quality really everywhere, especially at depth? And this too is a good question. Remember, the process is you have the scientists look at the pond. They determine the so-called threshold concentration. nitrogen's here now, we gotta get down here. And presumably, the threshold concentration is what's necessary to reach for all of the degrees of impairment, including the bottom, water quality and benthic fauna. So on the premise that that threshold concentration is targeted at overcoming that deep water quality problem, the answer is yes. The TMDL, once established, if it's met, should handle all the problems, including those at depth.
Thanks, Mike. Any other comments on these responses from the committee? Charlie, any thoughts you have? And again, as Mike said, I know the committee appreciates the time you put into this. I think it's helped our work greatly. Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity to speak to you this morning. I wanted to address Mike's comments just now, but I also want to touch on something else later. With respect to Mike's comment on question A, I have to say I was surprised by Mike's response regarding the cost of pursuing the TMDL process, because if you look at the first 8 bullets in his answer to the question, most of those have already been answered. And therefore, I would think the cost of this work would be far less than the numbers that are being circulated. I don't know that. I'm just saying it stands to reason that the cost would be far less. We know the watershed boundaries. We know the estimated nitrogen loads, but they would have to be verified. We know the hydrodynamics of the embayment from the
We don't.
If anything, yes, they become less tidally influenced, and therefore the nitrogen loading problem would be worse now than it would be before, because there used to be inflow and outflow to the mill pond. Today, the mill pond is truly an independent water body, and suggesting that the rest of Nauset estuary has a major influence on Mill Pond is simply factually inaccurate. I boat in there every day, and I know how much tidal flow occurs there. There's very little tidal range, and that is because, as we know, the inlet moved. Mill Pond is really an independent case, and we have the data. We have the water sampling data that already exists. So that is not a question. We really just need to evaluate in more exact terms what the actual nitrogen load is, and decide through the model what that turns out to be. Mike is shaking his head, and so I certainly want to give him the opportunity to respond. But it seems to me that a lot of work has already gone into the mill pond, and we could do this much less expensively. Secondly, I take Mike's point and want to emphasize it, that the assumed reduction for Mill Pond in terms of the 750 milligrams is just that, an assumption. And as you've seen from Mike's work and Tim's work, the nitrogen load reduction requirements in other watersheds have been higher in many cases, 65%, 100%. And we should not assume that 750 would be the requirement. It may be greater. Thirdly, I am happy that the committee, or sorry, the consultants are going to come up with a preliminary cost estimate for sewering part of the Mill Pond area. That will be useful for everybody. With respect to Tim's comment, sorry, I keep saying Tim, Mike's comment on question C, Mike's comment addresses nitrogen load. It does not address nitrogen levels. and obviously nitrogen levels are different than nitrogen loads. What I was trying to drive at is whether we would actually see the concentration of nitrogen change, not whether the load would be different. And otherwise, I will try and constrain any of my other comments in the interest of time. I really appreciate the effort that Mike has put into responding to my questions. As I said, I'd like to address something else a little bit later. Thanks.
Anything further on this?
One last thing. Just, I was, we did 10 different scenarios total. One that we didn't talk about, which we are actually implementing, is the fact that some of our phases are going to be may be combined, like phase 4 and phase 5, because that's the study area for the next phase. And that would also, since we're dealing in 4 dimensions, 3 geographic and 1 time, right? Time being, how long do we want these if we're doing short-term implementations for Mill Pond, to get something done now in the interim. Time is also an issue as well. And if we combine those particular phases to one phase, which is a 3-year period, we've now reduced the time to when we eventually would get to Mill Pond by 3 years.
And with Judith's comment about the marsh attenuation, if we have that confirmed and comfortable, then we're actually accelerating.
Right. So that's.
But the current combination of 4 and 5 is what we looked at to keep us on track. That doesn't bring the date up. It keeps us where we have obligated the town for the state.
Yeah, for the state, but it will reduce, because we're doing these in 3-year chunks at this point. So it will reduce that time dimension to bring this sooner than possible. Because one of the big things is, well, how soon will all this happen, And that's one of the big questions that the people in Mill Pond are going to ask.
Well, and I keep hearing that we're not going to get to Mill Pond for more than 30 years.
And that's not true.
And that's not true. And I scratch my head and I look at, 3 to 5 year chunks. That doesn't time out to more than 30 years. So I know it's hard to plan that far in advance, but I do think that it would help to look at
We should take credit for at least being able to, looking forward to some of these things.
Well, I'd also remark that, we have enjoyed this deep investigation of this alternative short-term measures, but as we'll get to when we look at item 8, future agenda, we have a lot on our plate as a committee.
Turn the microphone for it to Kevin. So.
We have a lot on our plate, in addition to this one study. And I don't want to belittle it, but if we are responsible for advancing our overall comprehensive wastewater management plan, we have more than just this to do, guys.
Yes.
All right. Speaking of groundwater discharge permits, the ever-evolving, Charlie?
Would this be a good time for me to focus still on the Mill Pond situation, rather than going to the groundwater discharge?
Sure, briefly. Come on up.
Oh, come on. Yep.
Thanks.
As I was running to this meeting this morning, I finished an email which I've sent to Kevin and George, and I'm going to read it here because I know the topic is in your mind. First off, thank you again for permitting me to participate in the Mill Pond study. I realize I've taken a lot of time, and the study has taken a lot of time. As you know, I've sent an email encouraging people to participate in tonight's community meeting, and I'd like to share my reasons for sending that email. First, I believe it's important for residents to know the history and more key facts. Based on the meeting presentation that I've seen, it doesn't appear that this information that I've offered was going to be shared at the community meeting. Due to time limitations, it naturally would have been impossible for me to provide this information orally during the meeting. Also, sharing the information after the meeting would not enable residents to provide their reactions to it during the meeting. Therefore, circulating more information in advance of the meeting made sense to me. Second, one committee member has said that I'm the only one who appears to be interested in comprehensive mill pond remediation in the nearer term. Now that the committee has made its recommendations, this is a good time to find out whether other residents do support comprehensive remediation sooner than 30 years from now. And if 30 years is the wrong timetable, I'd welcome somebody's clarification of what that timetable actually is. The information I've shared with residents will help them reach their own conclusions on time. Third, committee members have said they are opposed to seeking a mill pond TMDL in any near-term way, and have been opposed to investigating nearer-term and comprehensive mill pond remediation. I hope residents will support that work. I've already received some suggestions in response to my email, and they are, one, that residents should ask DEP to start the TMDL process. Naturally, I would prefer that the town take that action. Two, the town should require the installation of advanced septic systems in all homes that contribute nitrogen effluent to Mill Pond. As we know, these systems would reduce nitrogen flow more quickly than an accelerated sewering program because a lot of time is required for sewer planning and construction. This requirement also would be less expensive for the town. I hope the committee will explore this option in more detail, including the reliability of the newest systems. I should add that I wish my email to residents had highlighted this option to a greater extent. And third, I've heard that the committee's presentation tonight is the first order of business, and discussion of my email should take place after that. I totally agree. I've also learned from another residents' outreach that our state representative, Hadley Luddy, is interested in Mill Pond's remediation, and one of her aides will attend tonight's meeting. So what's clear from the responses is there is a lot of interest in fixing the mill pond. I do support the committee's recommended actions, but I believe the town must do more because the recommended actions will not suffice to restore Mill Pond, and I believe we cannot wait decades for a solution. I hope the committee and eventually the select board will support the additional work that is needed now to achieve that result. One last comment, and that is the notion that the town can't pursue a TMDL at this stage just seems to me to fly in the face of logic and reality. This is something that the town could afford, the seeking of a TMDL. It's something that the law requires. It's something that will take time to do, no doubt, and to take the position that, oh, we have to wait until Eastham and Orleans spend the next 7 to 10 years working out a plan for all of Nauset Estuary just seems remarkable, since we know that Mill Pond is truly an independent place, or is almost an independent place. And I am no doubt that if we wanted to work on a Mill Pond TMDL, we could. I don't think that working only on Mill Pond would cost anything like what Mike Gigi has suggested. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Charlie. Just one thing for Tim, if you could, for tonight's meeting, could we get the right estimate of time window when we begin the study process for whatever phase number Mill Pond would be in, just to have that date range. So,
John Nelson's got his hand.
John Nelson?
Sure. So just,
But while he was, I was just going to say, I think that's a tough number to come up with what the time could be.
Oh,
Because I mean, I just did some quick, 3 years times this with this.
It's in our plan. So,
It could be, I think, as little as 15, 17 years from now to as much as 35.
understood, but
Okay.
we should go with what's a published plan. And that's all I'm
Correct.
asking for. So,
Okay.
John, do you know that? John Nelson's coming up, Tim.
I just had another comment about the IA and.
Right.
Hang on that. Tim,
Okay.
so just, you don't have to
Yes.
provide it now, but just what is the plan currently indicating when we begin the study of incorporating this into a project that would go through SRF?
yeah, I'll go back and refer to the
Great.
ACWMP schedule.
Yep.
And I'll take 3 years off of it for the consolidation of phases 4 and 5.
Right. And, when we mention this, realizing there's possibilities to accelerate, but there's also, because it's an adaptive plan, possibilities that we learn, even through short-term measures, that we might defer. It's just a reality. But, John, regarding IA systems, mandating them to this area.
John Nelson, sewer coordinator. One of my tasks and my position is to deal with public property owners. Question that I get is about the IA systems and the cost. We're talking about potentially making a small group do IA systems. Their effectiveness is not as good as sewer,
Right.
considerably not as good. So if the treatment plant is getting effluent of 3 milligrams per liter, but you get 25 milligrams, is this going to affect many more property owners to put in a system that could potentially cost them twice as much as connecting to sewer? So I'm getting some contacts, some questions about, it's bad enough that, we have to pay for sewer. Now I potentially have to pay for more, and now it's not located to 15 residents. Now it's 150 because you need to meet that theoretical 750 kilograms a year.
That would be a $6 million cost, by the way. I did the math.
But these are some of the questions I'm getting. So where IA system may have its place, by the time you see the removal, 10, 15 years from now, sewer would be there. Would they catch up and be a moot point for these people outlaying all this money, where you could just kind of sit back, do sewer as a part of a phase, and get the results at the same point in time and cost them less? I hear people saying, it's expensive for the town to do the studies, it's expensive for this. I get the calls, it's expensive for me. So I just want to make sure that the property owners are represented, that it's very expensive for them. And to do IA systems because of a few people's concern in one area, it's going to affect a lot more people than just that direct frontage and
Absolutely.
stuff.
That was my question. That was going to be my question to Charlie, was, did he really mean everybody in the area, or did he mean all new properties going into the area? Because that's a significant difference. So in your memo, because if it's everybody, that's 150 homes and $40,000 a house,
least, yeah.
which is $6 million to that particular community, which, might as well
I'm just looking
wait
at,
for that.
the cost of the property, because that's,
More than 40.
I have that question daily.
Yeah.
And I feel like I need to represent the people a little bit more and express that it's expensive. I know you guys have cost town-based that it's expensive, it trickles down. It costs them too. And they don't have the resources of some funding, some state grant or anything, you know, there's very little to help them. Now you want to talk about making them put in a system 50%, 100% more than connecting to sewer, where their nitrogen removal rates are hideous.
Well, if I can also add too, and John, you're the regulatory body that puts the conditions on these people, and those conditions include quarterly reporting to health staff.
Correct.
What does quarterly reporting to health staff mean? That means someone like John or Meredith or Alex need to review the reports.
Right.
You multiply that by
100?
hundreds more, we don't have enough staff.
And I don't believe the town requires the influent nitrogen. It's only effluent that carries. So we don't even know the actual removal rate. You're just seeing
Performance.
round number,
Performance of the
20%
system.
milligrams coming out. Whereas
Oh
the
my God.
treatment plant might be doing 3 or 5,
do
so
higher.
there's a much better rate there.
So Brewster looked into that approach, and they did a whole study, and they had extensive discussions with DEP around it in terms of Brewster's contribution to Pleasant Bay. They ended up finding that only a couple of systems, and Mike, jump in and correct me on this, but a couple of systems would succeed with effluent in something 10 parts or less. I mean, a wastewater plant will get it down to 1 to 3. But the other piece of this is when you're using these IA systems, you're discharging within the watershed. So yes, you're reducing it by 10 parts instead of the 1 to 3. But when it goes to the wastewater plant, you're reducing it 100%. And now what you're discharging back into the ground is continuing to contribute to the pond. The other piece of it is, with these IA systems, you generally find that the best result comes from high motivation. So people who really want to do right by their waters, and I'm not suggesting that the folks in Mill Pond don't want to do right by their waters, of course they do. But where that is the motivation, I mean, I'm putting this thing in because I really feel strongly, you tend to get a better result than when you're adding it because you want another bedroom, or you're adding an IA system because the town has told you you must because you're in a nitrogen impaired area. Because in those cases, you're going to continue to use bleach in your laundry. You can't do that with an IA system. You're going to continue to use drain cleaners and harsh chemicals. You're going to continue to use antibacterial soaps for hand washing. None of that can you do with IA systems if you want them to perform, because they operate by bugs, and when you kill the bugs, then you've killed the effectiveness of the system. Which I think is why when you see the report that says these systems can get your effluent down to XYZ, yes, they can, but will they in the real world? They also want constant, steady use. They don't like feast and famine. You can't starve them for 3 weeks while you go away on a golf trip and then come back and overload them with visits from the grandkids. It doesn't work. So, yeah, what we tend to find on Cape Cod is our lifestyle is not conducive to these systems for getting good results. And overall, the cost does not warrant.
And one further point, there is if you were to pursue a TMDL, there's a scenario where the TMDL would require so much removal that even with 100% of the homes on an IA system, wouldn't meet it. So you
like
call
Mill
Mr.
Pond.
Smith and say, thank you for putting an IA system in, but guess what? Now you're gonna have to be sewered.
Now you're going to be sorted.
And that, we don't know that's the case, but there's a scenario where that's the case, and
I don't want to have
that would be a big factor in me in.
Having spent $60,000 to put in your IA system, now here's your bill for betterment and connection.
That's right. We were just saying, what a great phone call to have.
Right.
That'd be fun.
John?
Good luck, John.
Yeah, I was just going to say, John, you're going to get that call. Again, really good discussion. Again, thank you for the prompting on this. It is now an hour and 10 minutes we've spent on this.
I'm just going to respond by saying I appreciate the comments on IA systems. And what they say to me is that sewering is the answer. And so we ought to get about that. And I just don't buy the timetables that members of this committee have put forward here that we have to live by. Thanks.
Okay. Mike, groundwater discharge permit. We having fun?
Oh, absolutely.
And this is another topic that I'm introducing today that we'll need to be talking about again, so I can streamline this if time is an issue. But I mentioned adaptive management. You decide you want to go to California on vacation. Do you pick the route between Orleans and San Francisco now, or do you wait till you see the weather forecast when you get to St. Louis? That's the point. You get information based on where you are, and you proceed accordingly. Now, in addition to all the unknowns we've talked about, regulations change. So we may have a plan that meets today's regulations, but all of a sudden we have to revisit it and do more or less because the regulations have changed. And that's really the reason why I'd like to introduce, give me a second.
Freeze up on you?
Okay.
There we go.
So the regulation in question here is groundwater discharge permitting. The town of Orleans holds a groundwater discharge permit for the existing wastewater treatment plant. And you've justifiably thought about alternatives for Mill Pond and elsewhere in town where a sewering alternative creates wastewater that's got to go somewhere, goes to the treatment plant. So you need to worry about maybe expanding the wastewater treatment plant, and we've thought about that, good. But let's also think that once you create that additional effluent, it's got to go somewhere. So at some point, not only do you need to increase the size of the treatment plant, but you've got to increase the size of the disposal system and get it re-permitted. So I've got some background here to take you through sort of like effluent disposal 101, and I'll do it quickly, but we probably need to come back to this. But in my practice, more than just Cape Cod, most municipal wastewater facilities discharge to surface waters, to streams or rivers or the ocean. And southeastern Massachusetts is the exception to that. So I call it land-based effluent disposal. It's not to a stream or a river. It's discharged to the land, and the effluent ends up in the groundwater. Hence, the DEP's calling it a groundwater discharge program. So, a bit of a survey. There's several ways to do this. Rapid infiltration, open sand beds were in use at the Tri-Town Septic Facility. You may all remember them. They're relied upon by Barnstable, Chatham, and Falmouth as their means of disposal. It's the highest rate system, so you need the least amount of land, but it's visible. They're open beds. So some people go to subsurface disposal, like you all have in your backyards with your Title V systems, but this is a municipal system. And Provincetown relies on subsurface systems. Oak Bluffs does. And one of the beauties of these is it allows dual use. You can hear a band concert in Ocean Park in Oak Bluffs, and you're sitting on the leaching field. So they've made a dual use. You've selected Wix, a new technology. I like them a lot. They're in use obviously in Orleans, but also on West Island and in Fairhaven, and Tisbury has a pair. The fourth major category is drip dispersal, where you bury tubes at a shallow depth, and it's often used in private projects. So there's the four. I'm hoping that the town of Orleans is able to continue with Wix, but that's an important question. Now, there's two permitting programs involved. If it's a surface water discharge, it's a so-called NPDES. There are the words that go with that. It's a federal program. Many states have received delegated authority. Massachusetts said no, so it's a federal permit if you're going to surface waters, and it's a mass DEP permit program for groundwater discharge. So you look at that quickly, and it looks like Moby Dick heading west with green hair, but it's a cut through the earth, a cross-section, with the ground surface with the grass on the top, the water table down below, and we're going to slowly think about how that site might be developed and what the impacts are. I use the term water table, and I'm hoping everybody is comfortable with that. Dig a hole, you find soil that might be moist, then all of a sudden you reach the groundwater, and the top of the groundwater is called the water table. So in that slide, the gray area is soil but unsaturated, and the brown is the groundwater, and the top of the groundwater is the water table. So let's use the same approach, and let's put in an effluent disposal system that's land-based, that vertical arrows indicate the effluent coming in, and guess what? The water table has no choice but to mound up. And mounding is a key term in most of what I'm going to talk about next. And I've shown here the example that just meets the state requirement that there be 4 feet of unsaturated soil, the so-called vadose zone. So this is meant to show traditionally the kind of limiting case for municipal discharges. If you were to go the next step, increase the rate, and you get down to 2 feet of unsaturated zone, you won't get a permit. This is the principal stumbling block for the hundreds of sites I've looked at over the years. They're low-lying, it's shallow groundwater, and you have to tell the client, yeah, you may want to discharge 500,000 gallons a day, but if you do, the mound's going to be too high, you got to cut back. And cutting back, if you already have a nitrogen control number, means you got to find another site. So 4 feet to groundwater is a very important point. And I see a question budding in
Yeah,
Lynn's
so
mind.
do you lose a permit if there's water table issues and flooding and extraordinary storms and so on, that we're not having this problem with our water table right now. But I'm just wondering about situations in other places where, holy moly, you know.
There are places that have effluent disposal systems, land-based, that they thought was going to be 4 feet to groundwater, and it's not.
Yeah, so,
And there's one just down the street, and I'm going to talk to you about it in just a second. Thanks for that question.
Every homeowner should understand this because they have the same problems with their septic systems.
Right.
Yeah.
So they have to have so much ground underneath it before it hits water.
So I'll go back to the complying scenario here. So the groundwater is flowing from left to right because it's essentially going to end up in that stream. And I've drawn this in such a way that the mound doesn't quite, it dissipates before you get to the stream. In this scenario, and I haven't drawn it very well, but the mound, intersects the stream. So even though you might meet the 4 foot to groundwater, you got to worry about water table rise elsewhere. And that's at the heart of a new DEP requirement that I want to talk to you about. But first, I do a lot of reviews of projects, either as a peer reviewer or within my firm. And these are Mike's 4 rules. If you're going to have a successful effluent disposal system, it's got to do these things. First of all, the soils are going to be permeable enough that the effluent is absorbed by the soil. It goes away, it doesn't pond. A ponded system is a failed system. Second, you gotta predict, you gotta have a mound situation where there's at least 4 feet of unsaturated zone ahead of it, as we just talked. And you need to look, let me just go back. Here what I'm showing is, here's the site, but consider a property line halfway to the stream, somebody else's property. So off-site, you gotta worry about no breakout. You don't, if you have a system at the top of the hill, if you don't do it right, it might break out on the side of the hill and become a surface water flow. That'll get you fined real quick. You might, in a low-lying site, you might raise the groundwater to the point where a homeowner's occasionally wet basement is wet all the time. That happens. That's not desirable. And people may have just enough,
Understatement.
just enough depth to groundwater in their septic system, but all of a sudden, the groundwater's a foot higher. So you
oh
make them out
yeah,
of
so the
compliance.
house I had over by Skaket, they dug a basement. And in the wet winter and the spring, I would come back to the house over by Skaket with 6 inches of water of, snow melt in my basement until I put in French drains and, yeah.
So what do you do if the town of
I don't
Orleans
want to
puts
know
in?
if it's,
So
Upstream, they put it.
you get the point.
Now, why that basement was permitted And originally, I don't have any idea. I bought the house that way, yeah.
So
It
in
was a new
addition to
build.
those impacts, we need to think about private wells, where water quality might be impacted. But we also need to think about wetlands, and it's mostly wetlands that I want to talk about from here on in. And then the fourth of Mike's 4 rules is you got to worry about where the effluent and its contaminants are going to end up. Is it going to end up in a pond, where you better provide a high degree of phosphorus removal? Is it going to end up in a coastal embayment? And aren't we lucky in Orleans that we found effluent disposal site that is outside, or largely outside, a nitrogen-sensitive area? So there's the 4 rules, but I really want to home in on the wetland impact. So if, Bob, you want to get a permit for a new water supply well, under the Water Management Act, you got to predict if you have a drawdown curve because you're pumping the groundwater, is that going to lower the water table at a nearby vernal pool? Justified consideration. So DEP's had that on the books for a long time, but they've sort of said, okay, let's look in the other direction. If we mound up the groundwater, are we gonna do away with the seasonality of a vernal pool? Are we gonna change the nature of wetlands? Are we gonna impact cedar swamps? All of those questions. So what the DEP has done is they've established a threshold of 0.1 feet, about an inch. So if you're proposing an effluent disposal system, and the modeling shows that you're gonna raise the water table more than
An inch.
0.1 feet, you won't get a permit
At what location? At the property line, or?
at the wetland.
At the.
So maybe the wetland is 50 feet away. I'll talk about the Yarmouth case now, where the wetlands of concern are 3/4 of a mile away. So the question becomes, really, 0.1 feet, 1 inch? Is that a realistic number? And DEP says, well, it may be, so if you're gonna cause the water table to rise by more than 0.1 feet, you gotta show us, DEP, that you're not gonna have an impact. So, that current threshold, they're calling it the de minimis number, is so stringent that towns and their consultants are up in arms big time. The commission held a joint meeting of interested parties last month that I got a chance to attend, and towns are really upset about this, and I'll give you a couple of examples of why.
Mike, can I just jump in, only because folks need to understand all the process we go through. I mean, we do a comprehensive plan, we file that, we get funding, we go through SRF to get their support, we go out to bid, we build this. We cannot operate that plant until we get the last remaining thing, which is this discharge permit. You can do all your front-end stuff, but this actually is the last linchpin, and it can hold up the works.
So let's look around the Cape with our 0.1 foot glasses on. Barnstable designed and built rapid infiltration beds for 4.2 MGD. They can't get above 2.3 before they flood basements and they flood low-lying parking lots down gradient. The lawyers are involved. There's one example. A more recent one in Yarmouth, they're developing a 2 million gallon a day wastewater treatment plant and associated sewers. The treatment plant is about a third done. The sewers are probably 90% done. It'll generate 2 million gallons of wastewater. The site that they hope to use for the whole shooting match, or at least 1 million gallons of it, DEP issued a permit at 0.37. So 2 million gallons of wastewater coming down pretty soon, a permit of 20% of that. And the 0.37 is based on the modeling that says any more than that, and it won't be a 0.1 foot rise, it'll be something higher. So the 0.1 foot threshold is a major problem in Yarmouth, and that's why
Wow.
Bob Rittenauer, the town manager, was the most livid at the meeting that I attended in December. So what does Yarmouth do? Board of Health, within a year, is gonna send out the notices to connect. So Yarmouth is desperately looking for other sites. They found one at the Bayberry Hills Golf Course that might get them up to that 2 million gallons a day. 2 million gallons a day is phase one, and there's 4 more phases. So Bob Brittenau's comment is he's gonna be lucky to handle his phase one flows, and if this edict stays in place, he's got no place to put it. Yet he's still got a nitrogen control measure that he's gonna solve by sewers. They're gonna, so what do? Do you meet the 0.1 or do you meet the TMDLs? That's the issue. I'm just starting a project in Sandwich in the next couple of months off Quaker Meeting House Road, where it's 100+ feet to groundwater. The nearest wetland is 8,000 feet away. We're hoping that we're not gonna have the 0.1 foot. In fact, that site was selected for that reason.
Maybe Yarmouth
They-
could
the
pipe to,
groundwater.
Yeah, pipe too.
could Yarmouth pipe to Sandwich?
Or we
Whole
need a
nother
bigger
story.
ocean. basically.
Whole nother story.
This so underscores what we've been saying in-house, is that it is not the capacity of the plant, it's the limiting capacity.
Discharge.
Is the discharge.
Yeah. And Mike, the point you raised, and again, later on when we look at our future agenda items, you know, in our overall planning, and Tim, I know you're listening, we really do need to, and we've got it in monthly reports, the performance of the WICs, we really do need to address this because it's going to underpin that future plan expansion. We need to know this information sooner, because we do have the highest point in town, that is High Hill, good choice, and we also have an alternate site. You know,
the street.
not convenient, but it's there. So if we have to plan to use that, there'll be a number of hoops to jump through. But I feel confident, Mike, with awareness of the other towns' challenges, that we're probably gonna be okay. But I say that with a desire to still have that
Back
confirmed.
All the
Yeah.
time.
So I took the watershed map and I put a red dot at the location of the existing WIC facility. And it's, you know, striking that we call it largely within a non-sensitive area, but look, it's it's at the high point, and there could be impacts to Crystal Lake, there could be impacts to Town Cove. So it's complicated and it bears a detailed look. So I dug out Tim's 2018 hydrogeologic evaluation, and that's the report that now must address the 0.1 foot. It did not at that time. And based on the numbers I see, that if there's a discharge of 250,000 gallons a day, that the water table rise at Namskakett will be half a foot. About 0.15 at Cedar Pond and Little Namskakett. Bump it up to 500,000 gallons a day, which is close to where you'll need to be when you expand the treatment plant. The water table rise just at Namskakett Creek is over a foot. A foot versus an inch. So you have a permit, and I'm not suggesting that anybody's gonna take it away from you, but you go to expand the treatment plant to have more discharge, these rules apply as if you didn't have a permit at all. The increase will be subject to those requirements. So,
So, Mike, just on those 3 locations, 2 of them are marine waters with a substantial tidal range that far overcomes those numbers we're talking. And the third is Cedar Pond, where it's a dam-controlled pond, where any increase in the groundwater level is not going to result in an increase in the pond for very long because the water runs out.
Yep.
Is there an avenue for those things to be expressed in a permit so that they are acceptable?
yeah, so here's what would happen. You would, let's say you wanna go to 500,000 gallons a day, you'd amend the hydrogeologic evaluation to repredict these numbers to make sure they're correct. And then, because they're over 0.1 feet, you've got to do a detailed wetlands evaluation. And I mentioned Yarmouth. They did one for the site that's now permitted at 0.37. And the interesting concept is that the 0.37 is like an interim number. It can go higher if the situations like you mentioned, George, exist, where there's a higher increase in water table, but it doesn't matter. The wetlands are not impacted.
As in no harm to wetlands.
Correct. However, it could also go down. So here you are with a shortfall of over 1.5 million gallons a day of effluent. You can see why Walt Rittenhouse's got heartburn.
How did they take into consideration the tides around here, which are huge, you know, when 11 feet in some cases, and, you know,
So the good news is, high-level DEP staff heard the irate messages from the towns on the Cape that are impacted, and they're pledged to look at this more closely. But adaptive management, we've got to deal with what's in front of us, and so I want to just put an underscore, and I've been one of the ones that regularly says, let's worry about too much flow going to the treatment plant. And I haven't gone beyond that, but this is the basis from my concern. It's not just getting it there, it's treating it in a larger plant and finding a place to dispose of it.
Tim, you're coming on, anything you want to add at this point?
I was just going to say that I think this is a really, really good introduction to some of the considerations. I think that's honestly the treatment plant expansion is less concerning to me, at least right now, than increasing the discharge capacity.
Right.
So the existing permit that the town has is for 350,000 gallons a day. And as we talked about at a previous meeting, it was referenced earlier in this one, we think that the proposed phase 4 is going to take you right up to the limit of this. So one of the things that we're looking at for phase 4 is making sure that we don't exceed the permit restrictions, because we don't want any additional scrutiny on this right now. But when we get into phase 5, it's definitely not just a treatment plant expansion. It's also looking at the alternate sites that were identified previously. The town did identify a few alternate sites to the current WICS. It is, like Mike said, going back and looking at the hydrogeological report and the modeling and conclusions. I think that we actually, we just recently completed a WIC evaluation for DEP. And we discovered as we went through that is the WICs are actually performing a little better than we predicted, which is
That's
great.
nice.
So we definitely want to make sure that we're taking into account when we update the analysis, how are they actually performing, as opposed to how did we think they were going to perform theoretically.
Adaptive management.
Yep. So, yeah, I just wanted to chime in and say, yeah, I think these are very real considerations. I'm not involved in the Provincetown work, but I know that they are going through similar discussions for their effluent discharge as well. So,
And I know the town has historically done a survey of sorts at Namskakit. And the permit that
Yes.
was issued that you now have anticipated this problem a little bit, and it had a requirement that you monitor wetlands. And the choice was made to monitor Namskakit, and good, so you've got a background. But I think now's the time over the next couple of months to home in on this new requirement and see if we can tweak that evaluation to maybe better make our case when we choose to expand the discharge.
Question, does the current drought condition, does that affect the testing or the projections or?
If at a given location in Orleans, the water table over a 10-year period might go from here to here. And here's your point one. How do you,
Yeah,
that's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Practically, it's a quagmire.
yeah, okay. As long as,
I think my question is similar to Jenny's, but, you know, it would seem like for such a marginal change that
Yeah.
you need a lot of data, you know, historical data on groundwater levels and seasonal variations. I mean,
And
an
I know
inch
that
over,
There's no
The
shortage of
rain's
monitoring
hard,
wells
right?
in Orleans. But I think we need to be thinking about those that we might try to rehabilitate and start to get some data to see what the normal variation is. Some of them are probably already seeing the water table rise from even the less than full design of the treatment plant. So there's information there, we've got to start gathering it.
Yeah. We are at the lowest level in recorded history. Not looking better. There's no positive out there.
So both of my topics today are in progress, kind of a forewarning,
That's
but we
lots
got
of fun.
no shortage of things to address.
Great.
It really is good, Mike. And, you know, again, as Mike noted, in highlighting the other towns that are going through this, you know, thankfully through the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund, these concerns, challenges are shared among all of us. So we really are working together. And again, with the meeting coming up in Boston tonight and over the next couple of days, this is a topic being raised with some key folks. I'll just leave it at that. Phase 2, sewer connection status. Tim, you want to start? And John, anything you want to chime in? Welcome to.
Sure. Unfortunately, I don't have much of an update since the last meeting. There are still a number of items that need to be completed before we can recommend substantial completion to DPW and Board of Water Sewer Commissioners. There's just one or two items left before we can call up DEP and say we really need to get you in here for a clear water test. So we're going to work with CC, the contractor, to see what their schedule is for that. We have not gotten that information yet, but overall, we have been getting a lot of sewer tie cards. So we've been reviewing those and getting those available as quickly as we can. There are still tie cards remaining. We need more O&M manuals. There's some insulation within some of the manholes that needs to be redone. Still need some spare parts. The fuel level transducer in the generator is missing. Just some submittals that are have been provided, but we're reviewing them, making sure that they give us the right information. So that's basically what's outstanding still. So
Thanks, Tim.
yeah,
Yeah.
we have a meeting with Rich in 25 minutes to
Great.
keep him
We have
up
an
to date on all
updated
that.
date?
Last I heard, Judith Bruce just added for an updated date. Last I heard was February 24th, I believe.
What?
Was it? It
Oh.
was late February.
Oh, the tie cards, for the tie cards.
The substantial completion was estimated from what Rich indicated to me is late February.
Okay, so, yeah, that's what he said yesterday, that he
Right.
doubted it would be by the 18th, but we're, Board of Water and Sewer is going to schedule a meeting on March 4th, hopefully, and then March 5th.
Goes over here.
Over to,
The next day.
Yeah.
So that's the next optimistic.
So what percentage of tie cards are done at this point?
good question.
Let me see. I asked me to.
John, as Tim is doing that, it's good to remind that because you remember our community meeting and folks said, where are the tie cards? So.
All right. So we have received all of the gravity service tie cards. We got a slug of about 100 of them recently. So we're working
100%.
Of gravity.
except for the marina on Barley Neck Road.
Okay.
And then we're missing the low pressure tie cards for River Road. So what we're doing right now is we're working through that slug to make sure that there's good information in there.
So if John,
We
we're
just don't
gonna
wanna-
kind of have a ballpark percentage, are we in the 90%, 80% tie cards of total properties that are going to be asked to connect?
There were 100 outstanding, so they got.
Yeah, so we have those 100 to review, a couple more low pressure.
Out of 450. So
Yeah, so assuming that those 100 are good, then we've got basically all of them,
Okay,
except for a couple of them. And then they're also still working on their water service tie cards.
great. And I know, I didn't read the article Lynn showed me as I was just coming in. I believe there's an article about the performance or lack of by the contract. I will say, contract has really been working hard. There's been no time that they haven't shown up to do work, but we do have, as Tim went through, some outstanding items. So the town has issued a formal notice of noncompliance of meeting the substantial completion date per the contract, but we're trying our best to work with them because we believe, you know, with all the challenges of construction going on, from a standpoint of DEP and the support we'll have on this, we're not going to have any penalties coming to us, so therefore, we're not going to the penalty stage of the contract that could have been enacted at this point. But, right, Tim? I mean, everybody's working hard to get this done.
Yep.
Yep. John, anything to add on phase two?
Not too much, just the stub and foam would be very welcomed by engineers and property owners, so I know it's not us, it's not AECOM, it's further down, so I try and pass that buck. The phase two, pretty much I'm just waiting for the substantial completion, so
Gotcha.
John and his team can give me a date, I can date the letters and get those out.
Well, the letters are all done. The letters are ready, you know.
We just don't know the date yet,
We
right?
just have to put the date on it.
So,
Small property.
we're pretty much ready, so whenever we have substantial completion and we can get the date, I can get everything mailed.
And,
So are you giving, how much time are you giving?
1 year.
1
year to
year,
connect.
okay, that was my,
Jenny, go ahead.
Did you
a
decide?
letter went out to, or is going out to tomorrow, under tomorrow's date, from the Board of Water and Sewer with
What's coming?
what's coming, and lists of drain layers, lists of engineers, and here are the 2 steps homeowners need to take, and, yeah, and rah, go guys. Because I
Call
think
me.
one of the great things that's happened with the push for education and communication is that there is a backlog of people ready to go.
Yeah.
And that's a nice problem to have.
Yep.
I see the concern with 12 or 24 months, the delay in phase one. What I've seen, and I'm sure Tim can
I think
agree,
we're
there's a
teed up
huge amount of people
nicely.
have plans approved, pending approval. We're always gonna have people that are gonna lag. And those are the people that are gonna come and see me in 9 months saying, what do I gotta do versus 20 months, what do I gotta do? So it's, I think it's best to follow what
And
we're
then
doing.
There are unintended or unanticipated problems sometimes that come up that take a little more time.
And it depends on what it is. You know, some property owners have, you know, probate issues or something like that. And my biggest thing I try to express to them is just communicate. If you have a problem with a contractor, try and forward communication with me, because then I'll stand next to them at the Board of Health and say,
Right.
they need time. Others that just simply ignore the order letter and now they get a, you know, a show cause letter. I don't care, you're on your own.
We help everyone, we really do.
So it's, you know, and
It's
from what I've
around
seen,
that's right, exactly.
there's a lot of people ready to go. They don't want to wait until the end like phase one people.
Great. All right. Thanks, John.
Good news.
All right, phase three, construction prep. Tim, I think this is yours as well?
Sure. So we are getting ready to go out to bid. I will say that your DPW director has some very serious pull within Mass DOT. The DOT was late getting us comments back, and Rich called somebody, and all of a sudden we have comments on the plan, so we're working through those. So that's great to have him on your team.
On those comments, Tim, any surprises? Do you think they're manageable? And I'm thinking from a bidder standpoint, will they be manageable and workable?
Yes.
Detours
Yeah, I
and all
think so.
that? Great.
Yep. Yeah. The other thing that came up that we've been working through is artifacts found at the Pump Station 5 site. So we did a special survey with the archaeologists, and they found some artifacts So we have a report into MHC saying this is what we found, and
Wow.
just basically saying this is how we would like to proceed. Hope you agree with us.
Right.
So that would basically just be machine monitoring, similar to what we did in phase one.
Yeah, when we were close to Town Cove, there was an on-site visual inspector needed because of artifacts that were discovered. So hopefully that process will be the same here.
Cool.
So, yeah. So with the DOT permit, MHC concurrence, we'll be able to circle back to SRF DEP.
Yeah, the pump station, Tim, just jumping in for folks, the location of the proposed pump station 5 is at a little up from Route 28 on Finley.
Okay.
So if you're coming off 28 on Finley, just on the left in that kind of,
Sorry to interrupt.
no, typically little wetland area. So Conscom, you're going to need a visit too.
We've already
Atlantic
done it.
White
We've
Cities
already
one.
done
Oh, you
it.
did approve? Oh, great.
It's been approved.
All right.
Yep.
Awesome, Tim. So did we get from Clean Water Trust approval to go out to bid?
No, they're waiting on the DOT permit, so
Okay.
we'll get that in hand, and then we'll get the approval to advertise.
Okay, great. On schedule, Phase 3. And dare we go into next item, Phase 4 sewer planning? Let's do it.
Let's do it. It's coming along. We're putting together the scope and fee. Because it is a little bit of a different animal from the prior phases, for better or for worse, it's going to be a little different from our prior scopes, just to make sure that we do have not only the water quality and TMDL compliance built into it, but also the considerations and concerns for how do you translate what your water meter data is into what actually gets to the treatment plant, so that we can avoid those discharge permit violations.
Great. Any questions about Phase 2, 3, or 4?
Maybe just a reminder for all of us as to what, if anything, that we should be aware of for town meeting. So that, given the timeline, and especially the warrant article, do we have anything on the warrant for town meeting? So,
We do have 2. George, you probably have submitted it, but
Actually, I went through Rich Waldo, but we have preliminary design for phase 4. We have a planning number that I think came through Tim. We've also bundled our annual consulting money into that. And we haven't talked anything about groundwater monitoring changes, so maybe we need to have a conversation about that. And I will probably ask for Baker's Pond alum treatment as well, separately, because that's been put off a couple times. I don't know of anything else right now that was submitted, so that's where we're at.
Nothing on phase 3.
good. Yeah, and I think just in terms of the number that I saw last night for Phase 4 design, is it 3.3, I thought? Or, Tim, do you recall what the?
No, that is a placeholder.
Yeah.
We hope to come back to you with a little bit better number.
All right, but it's in that neighborhood, 3 to
it
5.
just, again, it's a matter of our keeping track of the what and the timing and making
Right.
sure that we're alert and aware.
All right.
Thank you.
Item 7, approval of meeting minutes from meeting of January 8th, 25.
Move approval?
Second, knowing that we worked a little bit
Yeah.
behind the
I
scenes on
was
making some
gonna-
tweaks and tunes
Okay.
to what was, and we even
Aaron's
had
got-
young Mr. Harrison
revisions.
involved in that process, just to get the words right.
Right.
Yeah.
Aaron, you got those
Bernie
revisions?
has them, and it's already in.
Perfect. So I'll call for a vote to approve the minutes. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
And I'll abstain. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 approved, 1 abstain, Karen. And again, thank you, Judith, for chairing. I watched the tape. Really good meeting. Next item, George, future agenda items, and it's a broad category, so I'm just going to jump in. We've got groundwater that we've got to work on. We've got database, Tim, at some point to update. Eastham coordination, we've got to pick up in terms of where they're going. Mill Pond will have next steps after the meeting tonight. And then what Lynn just mentioned, town meeting dollars, so that we can put that on. And then you put budget.
That was wrapped up
That's
in
it.
previous discussion, yes.
Any other future items that folks might see?
We'll probably give an update on the community and a better explanation of the Community That Cares program.
Yes, good.
So we can plan on doing that.
If we can have Amanda with us there,
Right.
that'd be great. Any other future items?
That I can think
I think everybody feels we have enough on the plate, right? All right, next item, adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. We're adjourned. Thanks, everyone.